What's up, everybody? I am back again. I couldn't wait to record another video, especially with yesterday having recorded in HD. It was not up to par in terms. The sound was solid, but in terms of the video, I was bummed that I couldn't cut the beginning and the end. And I could have obviously sent it over to my MacBook, but I was like, that was too many steps at that point. But anyways, it is morning here in California right now, and if I'm a little bit red, I just got off of the treadmill, did a 10 incline, 3 miles per hour, and woke up around 7:15, and then did the treadmill for about 55 minutes, and here I am now, and after this going to get some work done and then head to a networking luncheon. I am on the board of directors for the Highland Area Chamber of Commerce, and then after that I'm gonna come back home and get back to work. Tuesdays is always my deadline day for Inland Empire Community News, so it's always the most hectic day of the week for me. Next to that is always Monday, and then Wednesday, and then Thursdays and Fridays are pretty flexible, and then Saturday, Sundays are obviously extremely flexible, kind of just do whatever I want, but I always find myself working on those days. But enough about me. I hope you are all doing well, and so also thank you so much for all the kind welcome back comments the past day. It has been very heartwarming. You guys have left some incredibly sweet messages and comments, so I am grateful. And so I really want to pick back up where we left off. So guys, let's get back into it. Hopefully I can find where I was at. Found it. Also, I have some coffee from the university that I got my master's, which is CBU, California Baptist University, in Riverside, California. But, and sorry, what you are hearing right now is my somewhat loud AC/heater system. It's kind of annoying, but what can you do? So, cheers. Oh, it was backwards. So back into it. Again, if you are just joining, this book is called Trust Me, I'm Lying. It is a PR, public relations playbook, and it is written by Ryan Holiday. I didn't need to write this book, financially, that is. I could have made a lot more money as a media manipulator, working with politicians and businessmen. I could have remained nameless, touching your life only through the news stories I created. I chose not to do that. I didn't write this book for free, of course, and no narrator is fully trustworthy, myself included. I'm simply speaking personally and frankly about what I know, and I know this space well. Some have tried to claim that I was even lying, even in this book, but my reply remains the same. Why would I bother? I wrote the original edition of this book because I was genuinely tired of how things were. A good question about the ethics of a certain profession or activity is, what would the world look like if more people behaved like you? In my case, the answer was a lot worse. I wrote this book then, not as an apology, but as a warning. I have updated it twice because my warnings have turned out not to be serious enough. Because it turned out worse than I expected. I don't think you can argue with that. Sitting in a drawer in my office is a large box filled with hundreds of articles I have printed over the last several years. The article shows all the trademarks of the fakes and scams I myself have ran, yet they involve many of the biggest news and entertainment stories of the decade. The margins are filled with angry little notes and question marks. The scientist juvenile row of cramming old notebooks with scribbled invective amid the corrupt opulence of Rome. That box and this book are my notebooks from my own days inside such a world. Collectively, it was this process that opened my eyes. I hope it will have the same effect for you. Some of you, by the time you are done with this book, will probably hate me for ruining things for you too. Or accuse me of exaggerating. You may not want me to expose the people behind your favorite websites or politicians as the imbeciles, charlatans, and pompous frauds that they are. You don't have to like me, but you should listen. We live in a world of many hustlers, and you are the mark. The con is to build a brand off the backs of others. Your attention and your credulity are being stolen. This book isn't structured like typical business books. Instead of extended chapters, it is split into 2 parts, and each part is made up of short, overlapping, and reinforcing vignettes. In the first part, I explain why blogs and social media matter, how they drive the news, and how they can be manipulated. In the second, I show what happens when you do this, how it backfires, and the dangerous consequences of our current system. And then, in the back, I have some extra materials and interviews that might be of use to you. By the way, this is, it's just iced coffee, but what I do is I purchase the, jugs from Target. You can get them at any grocery store, basically the Starbucks brand, and then I add some monk fruit, which is a sweetener, which is a actual, sweetener that comes from fruit. So there's 0 calories, and it's nowhere near as bad for you as regular granulated sugar. And then I add a little bit of just some oat milk cream, but pretty bomb. Every one of the tactics in this book reveals a critical vulnerability in our media system. I will show you where they are and what can be done with them, and help you recognize when they're being used on you. Sure, I am explaining how to take advantage of these weaknesses, but mostly I am saying that these vulnerabilities exist. It is the first time that these gaps have ever been exposed by a critic or otherwise. Hopefully once in the tradition, hopefully once in the open, they'll no longer work as well. I understand that there is some contradiction in this position, as there has long been in me. My disintegration wasn't always healthy, but it does allow me to explain our problems from a unique perspective. By the end of this book, you'll see We have a media system designed to trick, control, and steal every second of the most precious resources in the world: people's time. I'm going to show you every single one of these tricks and what they mean. What you choose to do with this information is up to you. Book 1, Feeding the Monster, How Blogs Work. So this chapter focuses on how blogs work and how they manipulate people, the public, for the media and for media organizations and public relations specialists and whatnot. All right. So it's picturing a octopus with 5 tentacles, and on each tentacle, one says, "Getting clicks." First off, the octopus is depicted as the media with 5 tentacles, and one tentacle says, "Getting clicks." The other going viral. The next, SEO, which stands for Search Engine Optimization. Gawker and page view journalism. Blogs make the news. It is not news that sells papers, but papers that sell news. That is a quote by Bill Bonner from Mobs, Messiahs, and Markets. I call to your attention an article in the New York Times written at the earliest of the earliest junctures of the 2012 presidential election, nearly 2 years before votes would be cast. It told of a then obscure figure, Tim Pawlenty, the governor of Minnesota. Pawlenty was not yet a presidential candidate. He had no campaign director, no buzz, few donors, and little name recognition. In fact, he did not even have a campaign. It was January 2011 after all. What he did have was a beat reporter from the blog Politico, following him from town to town with a camera and a laptop, reporting every moment of his non-campaign. It's a bit peculiar if you think about it. Even the New York Times, the newspaper that spends millions of dollars a year for a Baghdad bureau, which can fund investigative reports 5 or 10 years in the making, didn't have a reporter covering Pawlenty. Yet Politico, a blog with only a fraction of the resources of a major newspaper, did. The Times was covering Politico, covering a non-candidate. I'm going to read that part again. So, the Times, such as the New York Times, was covering Politico, covering a non-candidate. It was a little like a Ponzi scheme, and like all such schemes, it went from boom to bust. Pawlenty became a candidate. Coverage of him generated millions of impressions online, then in print, and finally on television, before he flamed out and withdrew from the race. Despite all of this, his candidacy's impact on the election was significant and real enough that the next Republican frontrunner courted Pawlenty's endorsement. As off-putting as it is, that story seems quaint in light of the 2016 election. I'm not a Tim Pawlenty fan, but he was at least a legitimate politician who conceivably could have run for president. Donald Trump had considered a presidential run for as long as I have been alive. His subsequent election actually obscures the extent to which this was all a publicity stunt. Clearly, he was not serious about politics, or he might have spent at least a few months over 30 years trying to acquire a passing knowledge of policy. At the very least, one assumes he might have said fewer dumb, unguarded things when there were microphones around. As late as 2012, he was still playing the publicity game, toying with running because it always made for good headlines. And what became of all of this? Nothing, because there was enough discretion, enough unity within the media that there was still some semblance of a line. Politics was at least partly serious business, and so was reporting the news. But by 2015, when Trump declared his candidacy once again, that was no longer true. He wouldn't have actually run if he didn't think things were different, if he didn't at least subconsciously realize that his incendiary, provocative, and unpredictable personality would be traffic and attention gold online and offline. The man clearly sensed something that most politicians hadn't yet realized, that the culture of Twitter, the economics of online content, had swallowed everything else in the world. There's a famous 20th century political cartoon about the Associated Press, which was, at the time, the wire service responsible for supplying news to the majority of the newspapers in the United States. In it, an AP agent is pouring different bottles into a city's water supply. The bottles are labeled lies, prejudice, slander, suppressed facts, and hatred. The image reads, "The news, poisoned at its source." I think of blogs and social media as today's news wires. They're what poised the debate and the clarity of a nation of some 325 million people. They're how we fell for one of the greatest cons in history. So this next section is called Blogs Matter. By blog, I'm referring collectively to all online publishing. That's everything from Twitter accounts to major newspaper websites, to web videos, to group blogs with hundreds of writers. I don't care whether the owners consider themselves blogs or not. The reality is that they are all subject to the same incentives, and they fight for attention with similar tactics. That is true. Most people don't understand how today's information cycle really works. Many have no idea of how much their general worldview is influenced by the way news is generated online. What begins online ends offline. Although there are millions of blogs out there, you'll notice some mentioned a lot in this book. Gawker Media, Business Insider, Breitbart, Politico, Vox, BuzzFeed, Vice, The Huffington Post, Medium, Drudge Report, and the like. This is not because they are the most widely read, but instead because they are mostly read by the media elite. Not only that, but their proselytizing founders Nick Denton, Henry Blodet, Jonah Peretti, and Ariana Huffington have an immense amount of influence as thought leaders. A blog isn't small if its puny readership is made up of TV producers and writers for national newspapers. It doesn't matter how many followers someone has if what they produce ends up going viral. Radio DJs and news anchors once filled their broadcasts with newspaper headlines. Today, they repeat what they read online. Certain blogs more than others. Stories from blogs also filter into real conversations and rumors that spread from person to person through word of mouth. In short, blogs are vehicles from which mass media reporters and your most chatty and informed friends discover and borrow the news. This hidden cycle gives birth to the memes that become our cultural references, the budding stars who become our celebrities, the thinkers who become our gurus, and the news that becomes our news. Think about it. Where do you find your stuff that you read today? They find it online. This is just as true for normal people as it is for the so-called gatekeepers. If something is being chatted about on Facebook, Twitter, or Reddit, it will make its way through all other forms of media and eventually into culture itself. That's a fact. When I figured this out early in my career in public relations, I had a thought that only a naive and destructively ambitious 20-something would have. If I master the rules that govern blogs, I can be the master of all they determine. It was essentially access to a fiat over culture. It may have been a dangerous thought, but it wasn't hyperbole. In the Palently case, the guy could have become the president of the United States of America. Donald Trump did become president. One early media critic put it this way: we're a country governed by public opinion, and public opinion is largely governed by the press. So it isn't critical to understand what governs the press, what rules over the media, he concluded, rules over the country. I'm going to read that again. What rules over the media, he concluded, rules over the country. In this case, what ruled over Politico literally almost ruled over everyone. To understand what makes blogs act, why Politico followed Palently around, why the media ended up giving Trump something like $4.6 billion worth of free publicity, is the key to making them do what you want or stopping this broken system. Learn their rules, change the game. That's all it takes to control public opinion. So, we are already over 22 minutes, and I don't want it to be way too difficult to upload, but I'm going to end it there, and when we pick back up, we will enter the section called, So, Why Did Politico Follow Palently? Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you are asleep, and if you're not asleep, go watch my other video and fall asleep to it. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate the love, and I look forward